What would you do if you came from a land of frozen fjords and endless nights, where your only inheritance was an axe and a ravenous hunger for glory? What would you do if, after a journey of thousands of miles, you were offered a pact to trade your loyalty for an amount of gold your ancestors could never have dreamed of? Imagine the contrast. You leave behind the scent of pine, salt, and cold steel of your home. Suddenly, you are drowning in the aroma of exotic spices, incense, and suffocating human crowds. The gray of your world is replaced by the blinding gleam of gold and church mosaics, the deep purple of imperial silk, and the polished marble beneath your heavy leather boots. You hear the murmur of 1,000 strange tongues you do not understand, but you soon learn that the only language that matters is the clinking of gold coins and the sound of your axe in service to a new master. This is not a fantasy saga. This was the astonishing reality for thousands of Norse and Russ warriors who journeyed to the greatest city in the world, Constantinople, to become its shield. What you are about to hear is the story of the Varangian Guard, the tale of how Vikings became the most feared and faithful elite corps of the Byzantine emperor, the only men he could trust with his life. To understand this story, we must journey to two opposing worlds around the 10th and 11th centuries. On one side, Scandinavia and the Kievan Rus, harsh lands forged by ice and necessity, a warrior culture where young men with no inheritance or land saw the sea not as a barrier, but as a road to fortune. They boarded their longships and launched into the unknown, seeking riches through trade or more often, through raiding. They were the Varangians, the men of the north. On the other side, the Byzantine Empire, the direct heir to the Eastern Roman Empire, the wealthiest, most sophisticated, and bureaucratic state in the entire Christian world. Its capital was Constantinople, a city so vast and legendary that the Northmen called it, with awe, Miklagard, the Great City. The Byzantine emperor, the Basileus, lived in unimaginable luxury, surrounded by eunuchs, courtiers, and a labyrinthine bureaucracy. But he also lived in constant danger. Palace intrigues, coups, and betrayals were the norm. He could not trust his own generals, who often had imperial ambitions. He could not trust his local troops, who had divided loyalties. He needed a human shield, a group of bodyguards whose loyalty was absolute, unquestionable, and above all, stood outside the poisonous politics of Byzantium. The solution came from the cold north. In the year 988, Emperor Basil II, the Bulgar Slayer, a man as hard as his nickname, received an unexpected gift: 6,000 warriors from the Kievan Rus, sent as part of a dynastic agreement. Their ferocity in battle was legendary, but their most valuable quality was something else. They were foreigners. They had no families in the city, no lands to defend, no local political allegiances. Their only loyalty was to the man who filled their pockets with gold. They had become the perfect personal guard. Thus, the Varangian Guard was born. The journey from the northern lands to Miklagard was an odyssey of over 4,000 kilometers. It was not a simple trip. It was the first and most brutal filter, an endurance test that only the toughest and most determined men could survive. Imagine the voyage in their dracars. Feel the cold, damp fog of the great Rus rivers clinging to your skin. Hear the sound of your ship's timbers creaking, not on water, but on land, as you and your companions drag the vessels over logs to move from one river system to another. Smell how the scent of pine forests gives way to the dust of the vast, open steppes. Watch the banks of the Dnieper River with tension, knowing that the nomadic Pecheneg horsemen, famed for their cruelty, could be lurking to lay an ambush. And finally, after months of hardship and danger, feel the relief and awe as you see the vastness of the Black Sea open before you for the first time. This was not just a route for mercenaries. It was the great trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks, a vital economic artery connecting northern Europe with the heart of the world. These men were not just bloodthirsty brutes. They were merchants of violence, pragmatic men familiar with negotiation, risk, and profit. They brought furs, amber, and slaves to sell in the bustling markets of the great city. Follow the story of a young man we will call Bjorn. He leaves behind a small, poor farm in a Norwegian fjord. His only inheritance is the strength of his arms and his father's axe. This journey is his rite of passage. He sees companions die, not in glorious battle, but from dysentery or in a sudden ambush. He learns to sleep with one eye open and to trust only the man fighting beside him. When at last, after nearly a year of travel, he sights the legendary walls of Constantinople on the horizon, he is no longer a farm boy. He is a hardened survivor, and he is ready to claim his fortune. Arriving in Constantinople was an experience designed to shock and awe. It was a tactic of psychological warfare, a method to subjugate the rough newcomer and bind him to the empire's power through an overwhelming display of wealth and might. First, the Theodosian walls, a triple line of impregnable fortifications stretching for miles, something that dwarfed any fortress you had ever seen. Inside, the city is a sensory chaos. You choke on the crowds, you get lost in a labyrinth of marble streets. You enter Hagia Sophia, the largest church in the world, and the gleam of its golden mosaics blinds you, makes you feel small and insignificant. It is time to swear your oath. You do not do it on a Bible, nor before an altar. You place your hand on the hilt of your own axe and swear personal loyalty, not to the empire, not to a god, but directly to the man who holds the title of emperor. Your new role is multifaceted. You are the emperor's personal guard, his armed shadow. You are the elite shock troop on the battlefield, the tip of the spear. You are the city's riot police, tasked with crushing any revolt. And sometimes, you are the emperor's private executioner and torturer, the one who handles the dirty work. Your iconic weapon, the two-handed Danish axe, becomes a symbol of status and terror. It is a brutal weapon, capable of splitting a man's shield, his helmet, and his skull in a single blow. Bjorn is taken to the barracks, within the vast complex of the Great Palace. His strength and skill are tested. If accepted, he leaves his old identity behind. He is no longer Bjorn, son of Eric. He is now a Varangian, a member of the most exclusive brotherhood of warriors in the world. And then, he receives his first payment, a heavy purse filled with solid gold coins. It is more money than his entire village would see in a lifetime. In that instant, his loyalty has been bought and sealed. The weapon that defined a Varangian was the Danish axe. It was a tool of breathtaking brutality. Imagine a wooden shaft nearly 1.5 meters long, topped by a broad, curved steel blade, sharp as a razor. Its weight and length made it a two-handed weapon, meaning the warrior could not carry a shield. It was purely offensive. Its psychological impact on the battlefield was immense. The whistle of hundreds of these axes slicing through the air was terrifying. It was the perfect weapon to break an enemy shield wall or to shatter a barricaded door in palace corridors during a coup attempt. But the greatest privilege of a Varangian, the one that demonstrated his unique status in the Empire was an incredible ritual. When an emperor died, the Varangian Guard had the exclusive right to perform the treasury scramble. They were entitled to run to the imperial treasury chambers and take all the gold and jewels they could carry with their own hands. This act, which to an outsider would seem like chaotic looting, was actually an ingenious mechanism of loyalty. It was a massive end-of-contract bonus and a way to secure the Guard's immediate allegiance to the next emperor. The new emperor would confirm their payment, and in return, the Varangians would instantly become his fiercest protectors. The life of a Varangian was a violent paradox. Long periods of almost decadent boredom in the palace, interspersed with military campaigns of unimaginable brutality on the bloody frontiers of the empire. First, imagine the war. Feel the suffocating heat of the Anatolian desert as you march against the Saracens. Feel the frozen mud of the Balkans clinging to your boots as you fight the Bulgars. The smell of blood, sweat, and dust is your constant perfume. The sound of your war cries in Old Norse terrifies armies that have never heard your language. Now, imagine life in the palace. Endless hours, days, weeks on guard duty, standing motionless as a statue. In your heavy armor with your axe on your shoulder, in the marble halls of the great palace. The only sound is the echo of your own footsteps and the whisper of court intrigues you do not understand. Byzantine chroniclers, with a mixture of admiration and disdain, called them the emperor's wineskins. Their thirst for alcohol was legendary, but this off-duty indiscipline vanished the moment the alarm was sounded. In combat, their discipline was iron. They were always the emperor's last line of defense, the force sent to the most critical point of the battle when all else had failed. Bjorn, our young warrior, is now a veteran. He fights in a campaign in Sicily. He is part of the Byzantine army, but his unit, the Varangian Guard, always fights apart, as an elite force. He survives the battle and returns to the great city. He spends his generous pay on wine and women in the taverns of the districts designated for them. And he learns a hard lesson. In Constantinople, a courtier's poison in a cup of wine can be as deadly as a Saracen's sword on the battlefield. The Varangians were not mere spectators of the complex and bloody politics of Byzantium. They were the armed referees. They were the muscle that ultimately enforced transitions of power, no matter how violent. Imagine a night in the Great Palace. The sound of alarm bells wakes you. There is a coup attempt. You run through the dark corridors, your axe in hand. You see eunuchs and generals fighting in the shadows, loyal to different factions. Your only objective is to reach the imperial chambers. The sound of your axe shattering a barricaded door is the sound that ends the conspiracy. The guard's loyalty was to the throne, to the imperial institution, not necessarily to the person who occupied it at that moment. In the year 1042, Emperor Michael V made a grave mistake. He tried to exile the powerful Empress Zoe, who was immensely popular. The people of Constantinople rioted, and it was the Varangian Guard, loyal to the Empress, who led the revolt. They stormed the palace, dragged the emperor from a monastery where he had taken refuge, and carried out the sentence. They blinded him. They were the enforcers of the imperial will, whatever it might be. Bjorn, over the years, faces several crises of loyalty. The emperor he swore to protect is deposed in a revolt. A new emperor is crowned. His oath is automatically transferred to the new master. He learns the most important lesson of Miklagard. Power is the only true and eternal God. To the Byzantines, who considered themselves Romans, the heirs of civilization, the Varangians were noble savages. They admired them for their incredible loyalty and battle ferocity, but they looked down on them for their simplicity, their lack of sophistication, and their insatiable thirst for wine. The princess and historian Anna Komnene wrote that they valued their loyalty to the emperor above all else. To the Varangians, the Byzantines were Greeks, a word they used with a mixture of awe and contempt. They saw them as cunning, scheming, sometimes effeminate, and often treacherous, but they also respected them as the masters of strategy, wealth, and power. This clash of cultures is immortalized on the runestones of Sweden, stone monuments erected by families to honor their dead kinsmen. Many bear simple yet evocative inscriptions. He died in the East, in the Guard. Serving in Miklagard was the pinnacle of a Norse warrior's ambition. For the few who survived years of service in the harshest campaigns and the most venomous intrigues, the return home was the apotheosis of their saga. They left as penniless mercenaries and returned as kings. Imagine an older Bjorn, his face weathered and his body covered in scars. His chests are filled with gold, silver, and Byzantine silks. He undertakes the long and dangerous journey back to his homeland. He feels the cold northern wind on his face again, a wind he had almost forgotten. He sees his native fjord, which now, after having seen the splendor of the great city, seems small, gray, and humble. The true story of Harald Sigurdsson, known as Harald Hardrada or the Hard Ruler, is the perfect example. He served in the Guard, rose to become its commander, amassed a legendary fortune, and had to flee Constantinople after a dispute with the Empress. He used his immense wealth to fund an army, return to Norway, and conquer the throne. His life became the ultimate success story, the definitive propaganda that inspired generations of young Northmen to follow the path to Miklagard. The Varangian who returns home is now the most powerful man in his region. He builds a great hall for his followers, perhaps even a church, with an architectural style that vaguely mimics what he saw in the distant south. His stories, told by the fire during the long winter nights, become legends, stories of the great city, of battles in scorching deserts, of emperors clad in gold, and of the incredible wealth at the center of the world. He saw it. He survived to tell the tale, and he became a living legend. Imagine for a final moment that old warrior sitting by the fire in his hall in Norway. He holds a Byzantine gold coin, the face of a long-dead emperor etched upon it. The wind howls outside, but in his mind, he can still hear the echo of the bells of Hagia Sophia and the clash of battle under the southern sun. He was a barbarian in the heart of civilization and a king in his own right. The story of the Varangian Guard is an improbable bridge between two worlds. It is proof that, in the tapestry of history, ambition and necessity can create the strangest of alliances. These barbarians not only protected the beacon of civilization, but they became part of its legend, proving that loyalty, when paid for with gold and respect, can be the strongest weapon of all. If you could choose a bodyguard from any warrior culture in history, whom would you pick? A Spartan, a samurai, a Roman legionary, or a Varangian guard? Tell us your choice in the comments. If this journey has shaken you, subscribe to Chronicles of Steel. Here, we don't just tell history, we relive it.